to everyone, letting them know that as well. So again, thank you for joining us. And I am joined today by Hans Meter, the head of National Center for Career and College Transitions, and he will be leading our presentation today. So I'll go ahead and turn the control back over to you, Hans, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Today's presentation, we will be, as Jen said, we will be recording, and then we will also be taking your questions throughout. We won't be unmuting anyone's microphone today, but you can post questions in the questions section for the webinar, and then periodically we will stop during the presentation, and one of the facilitators, either Jen or Kathy, will read off some of those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So a little bit about, many of you may be getting our newsletter, Engage Connect. I previously worked at the U.S. Department of Education in the Office of Vocational and Adult Education, which had responsibility for the Small Learning Communities program as well as the Perkins Vocational Technical Education Act. And I've been working with Meter Consulting since 2005. Working on research and technical assistance relating to career and technical education and STEM education, and then with the National Center for College and Career Transitions since 2011. Today we'll be giving an introduction to the Youth Career Connect grant program. I'm going to just share a little bit of some pieces that might be informative to you relating to research on career academies, and also a little bit about the pathways to in technology early college high school model. And both of those have contributed to the development of the Youth Career Connect program. We'll be sharing with you what has been publicly announced about the program, some of the core elements that have been listed in the request for applications, and then also sharing some considerations that you might want to take into account as you're developing, deciding whether or not to apply for the program, and then if so, how you might develop your program. And then we'll talk a little briefly about the NC3T College and Career Pathway Planning Model, and open it up for questions and answers. Our organization, NC3T, has a mission which is every teen with a dream and a plan, meaning every young person having a sense of aspiration and direction, but also having a plan for moving toward that goal, and then every community with a capable, ready workforce. That's really a dual mission focused on the youth, and then also focused on the community's economic health. And our organization is driven around the purpose of fostering regional college and career pathway systems that are supported and led by alliances of educators, employers, and civic organizations. And then to help in that regard, we provide planning, coaching, and technical assistance to community-based leadership teams to help them plan and implement their college career pathway systems. So in hosting today's webinar, there's been an immense amount of interest, and that's contributed to a little bit of a technical overload for the ability for people to log on directly. But we don't have any official role in the YCC grant program. But we did want to welcome a conversation and help support a conversation about the program to help make sure that people that are interested in it get as much information as they can. I just noticed today that the Department of Labor has posted some initial frequently asked questions. They still have not given a time or a date for a specific prospect webinar, but I'm sure that will be happening in the near future. So we're looking forward to getting that official information from the Department of Labor. But we're not certainly representing the U.S. Department of Labor or the U.S. Department of Education today, but we are sharing information that we hope will be helpful to potential applicants as to learn about the program and then help them in development of their applications. So the official USDOL site says that the Youth Career Connect grant program is designed to encourage America's school districts, institutions of higher education, a workforce investment system, and their partners to scale up evidence-based high school models that will transform the high school experience for America's youth. So there is an evidence base upon which this program is founded, and we'll take a quick look at an important piece of that, and that is the research on career academies, a very well-researched model of college and career pathways. Career academies were developed in the late 1960s, and about 10 years ago, a number of organizations came together and developed some specific standards around academies. But essentially, a career academy has three defining features. It's a small learning community within a larger comprehensive high school. So small schools that are single theme focused are not typically considered career academies, although sometimes the name academy is adopted to fit a lot of different models. But the officially recognized career academy model is a learning community within a larger comprehensive high school. Focused on a particular theme. The curriculum is connected between the CTE coursework and academic college preparatory coursework. So a career academy is designed to try to break down that historic divide of either college or career preparation and really blend those. And then the third aspect is that employers are meant to be very involved, providing work-based learning experiences, and then also being involved in the development and the general carrying out of the Career Academy program. As I said, the academies were first developed in Philadelphia in the late 1960s. They were replicated extensively in California and across the U.S. With the work of the National Academy Foundation, which is based in New York City. There's actually a special funding stream called the California Partnership Academies in California, and there are somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 of these academies across the U.S., 400 or so in California, and another 500 or so supported by the National Academy Foundation. And then other similar models have emerged in California through ConnectEd California and the linked learning model, and then other kind of self-developed models in many, many places. The Career Academy model was researched and studied over time by MDRC with a longitudinal evaluation that compared Career Academy students to students who were very similar, so it was comparing apples to apples. And they realized that Academy students did show more improvement in attendance, in grades, in their credits. They were more likely to stay in school, slightly better outcomes in post-secondary education, but they saw some very strong positive effects on earnings over time. That 8 years after participating in the Academy program, that students in a career academy were earning about 11% more than comparable non-academy students, and for young men the gap or the improvement in earnings was 17%, which equaled about $30,000 cumulatively over that 8-year period. So as I mentioned, a number of organizations came together to create the Career Academy Standards of Practice, and they identified 10 components of a strong Career Academy program. You listed here a very strong, clearly defined mission and goal for what the Academy is accomplishing, the Academy structure, the role and the activities of its host district and high school, the role and interactions of faculty and staff, professional development to help teachers work together because of the high level of curriculum coordination and also the small learning community component. It does require teachers to work together much more closely than in a typical high school where every teacher more or less teaches their own content area, and at best you meet in curriculum teams or departmental teams. This really requires a much more interdepartmental approach. There's standards for governance and leadership, for curriculum and instruction, for the role of employers and connections to post-secondary education, assessing students, and then having a continuous cycle of improvement. So all of those standards are available from the National Career Academy Coalition, and it may make sense as you're thinking through your application to be reviewing your proposals against those standards of practice and to try to align your work with those standards of practice, because the RFP announcement does clearly say that small learning communities in the Career Academy model are one of the models that are strongly preferred in this program. There's also research findings from California that students that participated in the California Partnership Academies were graduating at about 10% higher levels than the general student population, 95% versus 85%, and were also about 57% were likely to achieve college readiness coursework called the A through G curriculum for college admission in California. And so that was significantly better than the general average of 36%. This slide here provides just the graphic of that improvement in the high school graduation rate. We will also be sending a copy of this slide deck to all the registrants for the webinar, in addition to a link to the archived webinar. So don't feel like you have to take copious notes here. Then the last thing I wanted to share about this particular research was a really interesting explanation of the potential return on investment to the taxpayers in terms of investing in partnership academies. And essentially, through increased tax payments for high school graduates, reduced health expenditures, reduced involvement in the criminal justice system, and reduced welfare expenditures. These are all things that are associated with someone graduating from high school, and this is based on a California analysis, that over the lifetime of an individual, this benefit was about $93,000 per individual. They took this analysis further and said that the California Partnership Academies contributed to about 12,000 seniors, which would have, when you calculated that increased graduation rate of the 10% increased graduation rate, about 1,200 students probably graduated from high school that might not have graduated at the lower graduation rate. And they did some additional calculations, and they came up with the number of 728 seniors that they felt were confident that had graduated because of being part of a partnership academy. They multiplied that by that lifetime value of $93,000 and came up with the conclusion that 1 year of the California Partnership Academies would benefit over this lifetime of these young people graduating from high school at about a value of $67 million. So I'm not going to vouch for every little piece of the mathematical calculation here, but it's a very interesting way of seeing what the return on investment for the taxpayers would be from having a program that does show that it has a positive impact on high school graduation rates. We also have some similar evidence from Metro Nashville Public Schools and the work they've done for many years around academies, the Academies of Nashville, and they have a model with freshman academies for 9th grade students, and then 9th grade students moving into thematic or career-themed academies in grades 10 through 12. Extensive teacher teaming and planning together, so very much carrying out the standards of the academies. And they've seen a significant increase in their high school graduation rates over the time that they've been implementing this program. I would just pause to note that the Metro Nashville used a federal grant, the Smaller Learning Communities grant, for this work. There was hundreds of small learning community grants that went out over the early 2000s, And some of those probably did not achieve a great impact, but the leaders in Metro Nashville had a very strong sense of what they wanted to accomplish using those dollars. And over time, they saw a really strong impact when they went to a wall-to-wall career academy model. And they saw their graduation rate increase from around 60% to pretty steady around 80%. So many more students seem to be graduating from the Metro public schools than would have otherwise. So a lot of this research is summarized by the CASN support Career Academy support network at Berkeley University, and you're welcome to access that research summary there. Another important piece in thinking about the Youth Career Connect program is PTech, which is a pretty well-known model, an early college model that was developed in New York City and now is being replicated across New York as well as in some other states. It's really a pretty new model, just a few years old in implementation, and there's some distinguishing features that have drawn a lot of attention. One is that it is very clearly designed jointly by secondary, post-secondary, and business partners. IBM particularly was a lead organization in helping work with the New York City Department of Education and the community college, some of the community colleges in New York, to design a 9 through 14 model where it's really not just a high school program that you might go into a post-secondary component. It is a seamlessly designed and offered program. Another interesting feature is that it's aimed very clearly at-risk students. It's not selective in its admission requirements, so it's technology intensive, but it's aimed for at-risk students, and it particularly puts a large focus on double blocking reading and math and technology for freshman level students, because those are the core skills that they're going to need to, and if they're not already at grade level, they're going to need to catch up quickly. So ninth grade is seen as a very intensive time to help students catch up and get so that they can access this 9 through 14 program that leads to an associate degree. Another feature of the PTech model, which is not a requirement from what I can tell of the federal grant, is that it is free to the student, where there is no out-of-pocket tuition. So essentially the community college tuition is covered by the state level and local resources with the PTech model. Again, that's not a requirement of the federal grant from what I can understand, but it is a really attractive feature that the students that get into the PTech school, they're really making a 6-year commitment to finish high school, to access 2 years of the community college program leading to an associate degree. It's a 5 or 6 year timeline, and that really is related to the academic preparation of the student. When you read through their playbook on how they created the model, they actually have 3 scope and sequences where students ultimately all end up at the same endpoint of achieving the associate degree, but depending on how much academic support and catch-up work they have to do, they're able to move through. Some students can move through on a 4-year basis, some students 5 years, some students 6 years. Another important feature is that every student has a business mentor that they meet with weekly, perhaps bi-weekly, but it's and those might be face-to-face meetings, they might be phone calls, but it's an ongoing interaction between someone who's working in the industry that the student is interested in, and the student who may not have a whole lot of social capital or to work with, so this is a really important feature for the program. And then finally, they set out to build this for replication. So they knew from the very first that the PTech startup school was not going to be the only one. And in that regard, they developed what they call the playbook. It's officially called the STEM Pathways to College and Career Schools, a development guide. And I want to make sure, if is my screen showing right now? Are you seeing a development guide showing? Okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. It looks like the broadcast is working correctly. So they've developed this guide, STEM Pathways to College and Career Schools, and this is an excellent resource for understanding how they did their work. And any of you that are developing a plan for this particular grant proposal, I would suggest that you review this. Okay, so that brings us to the actual criteria for the Youth Career Connect program itself. As you may know, the program is set up for up to $100 million in revenues to fund approximately 25 to 40 grants for individual or multi-site projects. The applications are due near the end of January, January 27th. The grants will be awarded in April 2014 for a few months of planning and preparation, with some level of implementation to begin in fall of 2014. The grant period is for 54 months, which is 4 years and 6 months. So the group, again, on my reading of the proposal, and we'll have to see what the official word is from the Department of Labor if they give this kind of guidance. But it doesn't appear that the program needs to be fully up and running in fall of 2014, but that is certainly where the implementation begins. And so right now it's not clear whether they expect students to be enrolled and programs to actually be operated in fall of 2014, or whether there would be a year of planning and preparation. And if, you know, it could possibly be that the guidance is in there, but might have overlooked that. The grants themselves will be awarded to eligible agencies, which could be local education agencies, public or nonprofit local workforce entities, or other nonprofits with education reform experience. So the grantees seem to be relatively flexible in terms of who the lead fiscal entity is. The grant guidance says that the purpose is to demonstrate a strong public-private partnership and must include at a minimum a local education agency, a local workforce investment system, an employer, and an institution of higher education. So those are the key participants that have to be part of the application. And that applicants are encouraged to reach out to other employers, foundations, and others in building their application and leveraging the federal investment. So that kind of restates this required partners. There is also a cost sharing or match, that there must be local funding that is brought to the table. That can either be met through cash or in-kind contributions, and the guidance suggests multiple ways that in-kind contribution can be met. It can be met through paying intern salaries or students. It can be met through tracking volunteer time of business partners. It can also be met by staff time that is over and above the normal expectation for teachers to be working together. So there may be other ways of meeting that, but that is a firm expectation that there be a local match. And one of the most important reasons for that is to try to develop the capacity for this program to be sustainable once the federal funds expire. I'll stop there. Are there any particular questions that we need to address right now?
Hi, Hans. This is Jennifer. We did have a few that have come in. One of the questions is, are colleges and universities eligible as a lead applicant?
We'll have to keep note of that. I can't give a firm answer, and I think the Department of Labor will have to check on that. But we will look as well to see if there's any clarity within the grant application for that.
Okay. Another question says, on the P-TECH slide, you talked about targeting at-risk students. Can you define at-risk?
I believe that the way that they defined that was students who were economically disadvantaged and educationally, well, they did not allow for any screening of educational achievement. So there was a focus on economically disadvantaged students, and there was no screening for academic achievement.
Okay, and we had one final question. In general, I believe, on any of the industry lists, is fisheries or marine industries listed? This person looked at but found that the lists were a bit confusing.
Mm-hmm. Not the information that I looked at in terms of the H-1Bs, which we'll talk about in a moment. I did not see anything about fisheries and marine biology, something of that sort. So I'm not aware. On the at-risk piece, I believe that P-TECH also used the term underrepresented. So for young women who would typically be underrepresented in some of the technology, the information technology programs or engineering programs, that was also a category that they focused on.
Okay, we've had a couple more come in real quickly. Question, if an educational agency has already received a P-TECH grant, are they eligible for the Youth Career Connect grant?
I don't see any reason why they could not apply for that. They're not allowed to use existing federal funds to count as part of their local match. And I think the P-TECH funding at the state level in New York use some level of federal funding. They may not be able to count that P-TECH funding toward their local match, but on the other hand, I don't see any reason why they cannot. There's some reference in the grant document that says leveraging other federal investments. So for instance, in New York, if the P-TECH funding was, some of it was derived from the Perkins Act, they could talk about leveraging some of the work that they're already doing with that P-TECH funding, and I don't think it would be a disqualifier.
Okay. Another question, do applicants have to develop their own program, or could some of the funding be used to start up already successful programs in a district, such as Project Lead the Way, if all other criteria are met?
What I understand is that they need to set up a pathway program that has some characteristics of a small learning community, which is very closely identified with the Career Academy criteria. But in terms of actual curriculum, they could use a curriculum like Project Lead the Way for engineering or its biomedical. So they wouldn't have to create their curriculum from scratch. But they would need to make sure that even if they're using an established curriculum, that they're still following the other criteria relating to the program that we'll talk about in a moment.
Okay. There are a few more. Do you want them now, or would you like me to hold them till later in the presentation?
Let's go through because some of these things may get covered, and then we'll answer some more questions in a little bit.
Okay, sure. Next question is, how many grants can be awarded per state? Can a state receive multiple?
I don't think I didn't see any restriction on the number of grants per state. The grants themselves go to local agencies, either education agencies or nonprofits or workforce systems. But I did not see any kind of criteria that New York can only receive 1 or 2 grants and Pennsylvania only 1 or 2. So it appears that it's going to be a wide open competitive grant process.
Okay, next question. How can we find the H-1B data for our region? I have it for the state, but have been unable to locate it for regional and county, at the regional county level.
Okay, and that may be something the Department of Labor is going to have to answer. They've already posted some frequently asked question answers, so we'll have to see if there's a way to post those questions. So let me move forward because I do want to address some of these questions just in the presentation itself, and then we'll open it back up for questions in a few minutes. But let me move forward with the presentation. So as we said, let's see, I've got the cost matching. And then the core elements. So these are the 6 core elements that every program needs to include in its proposal. The integrated academic and career-focused learning, the employer engagement, individualized career and academic counseling, work-based learning and exposure to the world of work, program sustainability, program performance and outcomes. So the first core element is that the program be organized around H-1B industries and occupations. And I can't speak definitively on this. I think we need to defer to what the Department of Labor guidance says. But it appears that there is this universe of H-1B visas that have been granted, and that the programs need to address those shortage areas that have been identified, and that there's some level of local need for workers in those particular industries. I have not seen direct evidence that you have to prove that local employers are actually getting H-1B visas. So there's these general H-1B visas that are granted, and then you do have to show that there's a local need for workers in a particular industry that you would select. But I don't believe you have to show that the actual local employers have been accessing H-1B visas to fill those shortage areas. I may be wrong, but that's the way I read the application, because someone asked me about that recently, and I didn't see that you have to make a local case that H-1Bs are being used locally for that particular purpose. But you do need to build, in general, you need to build your program around a shortage area where some U.S. companies are accessing H-1B visa workers. You also have to make a clear case that your participants in the program are going to be able to transition into post-secondary education or into employment. It seems to allow for direct employment out of the program, and I think it begs the question as to whether or not your program does seem to have some sort of credential associated with it, even if it's students leaving right at the conclusion of a high school experience, that you do need to have an industry-recognized credential as part of your program. It has to clearly engage employers and other associates to have an integrated industry theme-based curriculum. So teachers and employers have, and post-secondary education should be involved in developing the curriculum, strong partnerships with post-secondary institutions. It has the criteria around small learning communities with cross-disciplinary teams of teachers. No academic pre-screening of students is allowed. So in this regard, it's like that P-TECH model. You cannot require a certain level of academic readiness. You do have to show how you're going to provide the academic supports for students to be able to participate in the program. And then a focus on your curriculum having integrated work readiness and employability skills. This is a short list from the application of the kinds of things that H-1 visas have been granted for. It's not a comprehensive list, but it does electronical engineers, mechanical engineers, chemists, statisticians, management analysts, etc. There's a pretty extensive list. A lot in the information technology world, and that is definitely the high growth area in our economy, and it's really the largest growth sector of the STEM professions, anything relating to information technology. You've also got some finance and insurance. You've even got some educational programming. I know there's gluts of teachers in some states, and there's shortages in other places. I'm not sure that would be the best choice for an H-1B visa program unless you're clearly in a region that is clearly experiencing teacher shortages and you're having to import teachers from other places. And then healthcare certainly is another area where there's a lot of demonstrated need for specialty areas as listed here. And you can, I don't vouch for how clear it is, but this is the official site where you can receive additional information about the H-1B visas. And then I would suggest that if you're interested, to also to submit a question directly to Department of Labor to try to get clarity on some of these specialty areas where it may be a little difficult to find the information. Some considerations that we would just suggest. One is that the voice of the grant be written from not just a K-12 perspective, that this particular proposal needs to have a very strong workforce and post-secondary education perspective. And it needs to be probably written in concert between the post-secondary workforce director and economic development office, as well as the high school people. Your grant will sound better. It'll be more the voice, I believe, that the readers will be looking for if you jointly write it versus just writing it within the high school setting and then going to look for some partners. Bring together the partners first and then work together in developing the program. It doesn't seem to be required, but the PTech seamless model where a community college partner and a business partner jointly develop the program, and using the PTech playbook could be really helpful. I think that kind of an initiative that's very seamless will probably be reviewed at a higher level. You might consider having that intensive math, English, and technology focus, or whatever the STEM focus is during your first year to help students get up to speed. You might consider differently paced scope and sequences based on where students begin the program, and that would accommodate students without having any screening for academic preparation. You might screen students not to screen them out, but just to diagnose where they're starting, but then provide the different scope and sequences based on where their academic readiness is. You'll definitely want to emphasize professional development to help teachers work in the cross-disciplinary teams. This is a very different behavior and activity than most teachers have experienced, so they'll need some training and scripting and support for doing that work. And then also similarly for having high school and post-secondary faculty work together on curriculum and planning. So again, you might want to review both the pathways, the PTech planning, as well as research on career academies. The second core element is employer engagement. This is a quote from the application. Employer engagement is integral to the design, sustainability, and success of the program. So you'll need to have at least one employer or consortium of employers. Definitely have to have work-based learning, which is getting students out into the workplace, as well as the mentoring connection of helping students get input from professionals. And the grant application lists 10 examples of employer engagement. It doesn't necessarily require that you follow all 10 models or all 10 activities, but it certainly would probably be a good idea. And just a couple considerations. These are just unofficial guidance, but suggesting, again, you review the PTech guide. They have some very specific ideas on employer involvement. And plan an ongoing business leadership steering committee. You'll want to have a leadership structure that can really be sustained and expanded, so it isn't just addressing this particular funding and the H-1B pathways, but other pathways that you might want to create. This is really an excellent opportunity to create a broader infrastructure for a pathway system. You want to include work-based learning activities in all the years of high school. Again, PTech has some interesting ideas of how to sequence that. And then include paid work-based learning, as you can include that as an in-kind contribution that your employers are making toward the matching grant. A third element is the individualized career and academic counseling. Again, quote, includes career and post-secondary awareness and exploration opportunities beyond the high school experience. The counseling component should address both preparing for college and preparing for a career. Every student having an individualized individual development plan, and then there's a number of counseling activities that are listed. It says that counselors meet frequently with each participant on a set schedule. Some programs, some career academies and small learning communities kind of outsource the counseling to an advisory committee. And so one of the questions I would have for the Department of Labor is, would meeting with an advisor, a teacher advisor in an advisory, count as a counselor for participation in this grant? The grant says counselors, but can you have other trained, prepared adults acting in a counselor role to fulfill the requirements of this grant? I don't know the answer to that, but this question I would have. I'll finish up these elements here, and then we'll open up for some additional questions. The fourth element is work-based learning and exposure to the world of work. And they list work experiences that are provided by the employers. I noted they say planned, structured learning experiences. So as you're developing your program, you need to have a process for planning structures, not just sending a student over to the work site and saying, have a good time and hope you learn something. It really needs to be scripted and connected to the curriculum. They may be paid or unpaid, may be subsidized, unsubsidized, may occur during the school year, the summer, or both. So there isn't a very clear guidance on exactly what these experiences need to look like, which gives some flexibility. There is suggested year 1, year 2, years 3 and 4, kind of a sequencing and a heightening of activities that students go through. So I just listed those here on this slide. So you may consider this formalized mentor matching process with a weekly or bi-weekly mentor-student check-in call. It's not required in the application, but it would be a really strong practice. And the meetings could happen face-to-face or by phone. You'll certainly have to go through all the processes to make sure that your mentors are trained, that there's security checks, but it's a really, overall, the research on mentoring and business involvement with students is very positive. PTEX suggests that there be a lead business partner. In their case, they had IBM, which was, obviously a wonderful company and very committed, but that lead business partner can play an important role in organizing and giving momentum to the overall level of business engagement. You'll need a lot more than just one business partner, but one strong, committed partner can really help coalesce the other businesses in the partnership. You might also consider creating a position for an employer relations coordinator or a business industry coordinator. It takes a lot of time and effort to keep those relationships working. And one of the challenges for sustainability is how that position will be sustained beyond the life of the grant. Be very hesitant to put staffing on the grant unless you already can show a pretty strong commitment that staffing cost will get picked up by a business organization or community organization or within the school district upon the completion of the grant. Because if that position goes away, then very much of the momentum of the business education partnership will also go away. The fifth element is the program sustainability. The grant seems to put a lot of emphasis on professional development of training, providing support for the new processes, the new skills that teachers, counselors, and other staff are going to need to sustain the activities once the grant funding goes away. And then also creating a very clear sustainability plan, particularly that these partnerships that are developed will be able to be sustained beyond the life of the grant. And that may be that you need to have a very clear commitment, written commitment, preferably from one of the employer organizations or workforce organizations, that they will take the lead in sustaining that employer engagement structure. And they also recommend that by having partners provide cost sharing through their matching contributions during the grant cycle, then that will also demonstrate sustainability to go beyond the life of the grant. And then the last piece, which I won't spend time on, but that there is an extensive set of measures of both kind of leading indicators or predictive indicators and then outcome indicators. So your program, you'll need to demonstrate which of these you already are gathering and have the capability of gathering, and then how quickly could you begin gathering some of these indicators, because this will be an important piece. I would suggest that you also not only talk about the indicators, but how you will report to the public and to all your stakeholders on at least an annual basis how your students are doing relating to these indicators. And another piece that might be interesting is, can you start to use these broader set of indicators, not just for the students in this particular pathway, but for other students, and expanding that pathway concept outward. So as I said at the beginning, these applications are due at the end of January. It doesn't appear that you have to have every piece of the puzzle complete and figured out in your application, but you need to have a credible plan for how you will be working with the partners and working toward these. And so I think references that you understand the research around career academies, the research and the model around PTech will certainly show that there has been that level of study and preparation that will be necessary to be able to actually implement the grant if you're able to receive the funding. These are, when we send you the follow-up, these are some of the resources where you'll be able to find the official information about the program. And then I'll briefly just talk about our organization, the NC3T. As I said, our motto, our vision is that every teen has a dream and a plan, and every community has a capable, ready workforce. We're doing this work right now in essentially 9 communities. Long Island is a network within itself, so a number of communities we're working with to help them develop their own version of a college career pathway system, which is built upon the Career Academy standards of practice. But it's a little more flexible depending on the particular needs and partners within these particular communities. But we define what a college career pathway is, and it's an educational program that connects both academic and theme courses, has substantive employer involvement, and a clear connection to post-secondary education. That's the individual pathway. And then a system is a collection of these pathways that touch every student. So with the communities that we're working with, we are hoping and helping them move to a vision of pathways that ultimately will touch every student. That'll take several years to happen, but we really do believe that this vision of every student focusing on career development as well as college preparation is the right way to go. We have a planning model, what we call design specifications. We'd be happy to share with you, and this is just a summary of that. Some of the elements have to do with community integration, connecting the education partners with the employer partners, and building that sustainable infrastructure. Some of them have to do with middle school exploration, helping students begin to do the career development and exploration and understand 21st century skills, employability skills at the middle school level, so that when they're entering into high school they can make good decisions about what kind of college career pathway program they want to be part of. So that's probably one distinctive that is not clear in the program application, which seems to focus more on career development, career exploration happening at the high school level. I certainly think if you could demonstrate that your career exploration is beginning at the middle school level, that would probably be a benefit. And here, all of these pieces are working toward the goal of students who are career college and citizen ready, with at least strong academic skills, transferable work readiness skills, and career navigation skills. This is a sample of a planning template for each of those design specs. As our communities, their teams are looking at those design specs, prioritizing them, doing an asset map in terms of what pieces do we already have in place that will relate to this particular design specification. Do we believe we need to begin work on this immediately, or in year 1 or year 2, 3, or beyond year 2, 3? And then how exactly are we going to define the challenge that we are trying to fix? And then setting up goal statements. So this is a pretty simple planning sheet, but something along this line would help you as you're developing your plan, some sort of planning tool. We suggest a very similar model to what the grant application calls for, developing a leadership team that includes a school system, a technical school, if you have one, community or technical college partners, and employer organizations. We do a site visit to help local leaders develop their shared vision, do their readiness of where they are, their asset mapping, and then helping them convene their core planning team and develop their leadership structure. Their responsibility is to continue to grow that local vision through discussion and consensus building, create their local pathway plans that last over about a 5-year time frame. We know that this does take a while to implement, so to think about having multiple pathways up in just a few months is not realistic. But every community will move at a slightly different pace depending on how much groundwork they've already laid. And then this is the planning structure that we work with the communities in terms of having a guiding coalition, which is kind of a high-level, a CEO-level coalition that gives visibility and credibility to the overall initiative. A core leadership team, which includes the stakeholders from the leaders from the different stakeholder organizations, and they carry out the primary piece of the planning. And then, as needed, developing of different working groups to focus on the community integration, the middle school, the pathways. We think that a working group on communications is extremely important. And communications is one of the key factors for success. And then also the system effectiveness. How do you measure the system effectiveness? How do you report on the system effectiveness? So I'll stop there. There's a few things that we may not have time for, but which is fine. We can send those out after the fact. But I do want to address any additional questions we have.
Okay, hi Hans, this is Kathy. Can you hear me?
I can, thanks.
Okay. I'm going to start. There are a lot of questions, so I'll tell you a few at a time. I do want to address, though, that yes, it's been asked a few times if the PowerPoints will be sent out, the slides, and they will be in a follow-up email. Right. Is the planning template available at the NC3T website?
It is not. At the end here, I'm going to put up a slide, and I'm going to go and forward to that slide now that has an email address. We would be happy to schedule any follow-up conversation with any of you who are interested. If you're seriously considering doing an application, we're not really in the business of application writing, but we'd be happy to spend a little time talking with you. Let me just, before I progress through, we do have a couple resources that might be helpful to you. One is a new book called the STEM Leader Guide, which is specifically about building a STEM culture at the school level, and then also a book available through NC3T on building advisory boards. So that's kind of a nuts and bolts how-to on advisory boards. We are also developing, it'll be ready in about March, an employer engagement toolkit, which is a more thorough employer engagement playbook. So there's a couple resources that we have available. But we will also be happy to set up individual conversations with potential grantees. There's Kathy's email address right there, and you can follow up with her. We'll set up a time. So go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. If a state that has not adopted Common Core, do you think they will be penalized on the application? And another one along that same line asked if Race to the Top states are allowed to apply.
Again, this is not authoritative at all, but I did see reference to challenging academic standards, some language that seemed to be lifted from the Perkins Act. I don't believe I saw specific reference to adoption of the Common Core. So I don't think there would be any penalty for a participant from a state that has not adopted the Common Core.
Okay.
And then the second question was for states that had received Race to the Top funding. Yes. I don't think I saw specific reference to Race to the Top funding, but I don't think that would be a factor either for or against.
And do you, I think this would be an opinion question at this point, but are urban environments targeted for grant award over rural educational environments? Do you have any take on that?
I don't have any take on it. I don't believe there was a reference to that.
I didn't see anything with that either. Okay, and someone asked where the frequently asked questions are located. I can tell you, I know that's right on the Department of Labor. If you Google the grant itself, you'll find that information, but we are going to include that link in our follow-up email.
Right.
And someone is asking if the grant can be used to subsidize the participants' employment.
The participants' employment, I believe so. I believe that the grant can help pay for salaries of the students. I was thrown for a minute, and I was thinking of the staff, staff writing the grant. But I do believe so. We'll need to double check on that. But I do believe that the funding can be used to help subsidize employment costs for internships.
Okay, do applicants have to develop their own program, or could some of the funding be used to start up already successful programs, such as Project Lead the Way, if all other criteria are met?
And I think we answered that earlier, that as long as the other criteria are being met, an existing curriculum can be incorporated. Of course, National Academy Foundation also has very strong academy models with curriculum that could be adopted as part of this.
Okay, I apologize if I repeated that. Okay, this is from Robert. He said $3,000 per head per year for college credit cost. Other teaching/training by LEAs, work experience programs, counseling, etc. seems tight. Am I reading this right?
I'll have to look into that one. That's a little bit beyond my understanding.
Okay. Maybe you asked this when I was offline trying to help the people that couldn't register or couldn't log on. Are colleges and universities eligible as a lead applicant? I think
we weren't positive about whether or not. It does say a nonprofit organization, so it would seem that perhaps nonprofit colleges and universities could be applicant.
Okay. And Kristen, I'm not quite sure if you can elaborate. What I'm seeing from you, and maybe another part of it was deleted. I see examples strengthening the pathways and adding internships. Kristen, I'm not sure if you can flesh that out for me. I will ask Hans that question.
This is Jennifer. I think that the question from Kristen was, is there a preference for grantees that have already begun a career pathway or those that will be starting from scratch?
Good.
Thanks,
That's a
Jennifer.
very good question. And it appears to me that this is about starting new programs that are related to the shortage areas that are being served by H-1Bs. I think because the way the Department of Labor is structuring is that it's meant to address the shortages that require H-1Bs, and an existing program, it'd be harder to make that case that you were creating new capacity for young people to move into a particular shortage area. So again, that's this whole webinar is not to be authoritative, but my sense is that it's really for program startup.
Okay, and I'm not sure, I thought I heard you speaking about the H-1B data for regional, just for regions. How is that available?
And we weren't sure, yeah, we'll have to, someone will have to submit those questions directly to Department of Labor to find out more information.
That wraps up all of our questions that are posted at this time.
Okay, great. I think, again, we're not authoritative, so I think any further questions would more than likely be better sent to the Department of Labor, but we're happy to informally converse with anyone that's interested in pursuing this. And again, as an organization, we do have a planning model. We certainly would be happy to help in some way at the local level. But I do think it's really important to step back to that original observation that a site like Metro Nashville took the same federal resources that many other sites took, and the difference was that they had a clear local vision for where they were heading, and they use the federal dollars to support and help really accelerate that local vision. I think all of us are aware of places that have gone after funding without a clear sense of why they were going after the funding, and then when the funding evaporated, so did the reform. So I really encourage all of you, I think this is a phenomenal opportunity to clarify that and bring partners together around what a local vision of a college career pathway system looks like for your community, and drive that vision regardless of whether or not you receive this funding, because that's really going to pay off on behalf of students and on behalf of your community.
Hans, we have a request. Could you put the website for looking up the H-1B visa again? Did you have that posted, that slide?
Yeah.
And Beverly is asking, is there time to write this before January 27th?
Very, very good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah. We're going to send this slide deck out to the participants, so I'd rather not go backwards right now. I'd rather leave your email up.
Okay, so Kristen, you'll get that when you get the slide. She's heard us. Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. We apologize again for the technical problem of the capacity of the site, but we do look forward to helping you, and just glad to share this with you today.